general orientation of what we're going to be talking about. All right. So let's talk about getting it right. Let's talk about getting it right. First, somebody tell me, what does it mean to get it right? When you have read a Bible passage, when do you know that you got it right? When the preacher has preached the same thing as you thought? Is that when you know you got it right? How do you know you got it right? Yeah, you must have got it.
You kind of get this, this heaviness kind of lifts from you, and you get this, I don't know, God kind of lets you know, like, wow, I got it.
But what if it's mundane, not earth-shattering, and doesn't really change your daily thing?
No.
But I mean, the way you feel can't be the barometer, right? Because I might have indigestion and interpret that as the Holy Spirit. Like, oh, I got indigestion. I must have got this wrong. But I'm just saying there's got to be something more that firmer that we can grab hold of. Yeah, Justin.
What the writer was saying in the story or the point to the story.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, but the question is, how do I know that I'm understanding what he intended me to understand? I mean, I didn't get to ask him, right? and so just let's get this for the record, okay? Tracy just said she knows the Bible's right when she's asked me, right? That's what. So I'm always right. She said that, right? I'm always right. Alan, did you hear that? So that's a dodge. Yes, ma'am. All right, here we go.
Not that I can think of an example right now, but I know that when I'm reading sometimes, I can read a passage that I've read 100 times, but I will see something different in it when there's something happening in my life, and then all of a sudden that verse speaks to me totally differently than it has in the past.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What if it contradicts? So I asked a professor one time this question. I said, the guy was ancient, and he had been a scholar since always. He wasn't ever a pastor he was always working in seminary and academic life, and so he had written a lot of books. We had to read some of his books. Oh man, they were way tough to read. Good stuff, but really hard to read. So I asked him, I said, have you ever had to change an opinion on something that you've written on? And he said, no, not really. And I thought, what, for real? I mean, I look back at some of my notes from sermons I've preached in early days, and I look at them again, and I think, man, an amateur was at the wheel, right? Because I may not have been totally off, but I was way shallow from what I could have understood. So I get new things, but generally deeper things, and sometimes I found myself wrong. Now, here's the anxiety for me, right? A lot of the things I've studied, I've preached. So occasionally I'll find something that I preached, and I preached it wrong. I can't go back and erase whatever. Hopefully it was a bad sermon and nobody remembered it, right?
Yeah, they probably did.
I know. It's like, yeah, it's their profile description, right? Somewhere out there on social media. Yeah, right. How do we know when we got it right? Do we have anything other than how it strikes us? Anything that we can compare it to? Any strategy to know that we've thought through it at least, even if we didn't come to a conclusion? But that is exactly the point, right? We want to know what we want to. We need confidence. We need confidence. In order to teach, in order to counsel, we need confidence. And so, yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cross-population of those passages, right. Now, okay, here's the difference. It's one thing to get facts right about what you're studying, Okay. Um, for instance, I could say I know the background story of, or a little bit of the background of, like when the book of Ephesians was written, about the year, about the thing, some of the political big things that were going on. And I know those because I've read other books, right? Okay, so I at least have some framing, some perspective, some whatever out there. And I can get the details right. The specific things that were happening. So where was Israel when Deuteronomy was spoken? Right. Well, he tells us, right? I can get those facts, so I can know my facts. Now I've heard people say before, and we all tend to do this. We'll jumble up several stories and we'll regurgitate something that is a different person with different facts, and we say the facts wrong to somebody. That's one thing. All right. But we don't just need the right facts. We need understanding, and we need not just understanding of what did happen, but we also need understanding of the purpose. And the understanding and purpose matter a great deal. What we want to be able to do is discern not just what is being said, but why it's being said. And I think often our study involves very heavily, relies very heavily on understanding what is being said, but not enough on why it is being said. Now, let me just read this to you. It's very profound. A sailor went to CCC to see what he could see, but all that he could see was the bottom of the deep blue CCC. Okay, so why was that written? Play on words. No, okay, let's say what it is. It's a play on words. That's what it is. We understand, but the context is stupid, right? Is there a sailor that went to sea? Yes. Was there a sailor maybe that went to see what he could see? Sure. But who cares about the nursery rhyme composition of this? Daniel, what did you say? It's for teaching children. So why is this here? It's for teaching children. So when an archaeologist, if the Lord doesn't return and 10,000 years go by and our culture is gone and somebody digs this up, they're going to say they were really bad poets. And of course this happened. Why would even anybody need to say this? And the answer would be, if you were in our day, they're like, no, the meaning isn't important. The purpose is important. It teaches children the difference between the ocean, sea, and how you spell that, and the act of seeing and how you spell that. Right? That's its purpose. So its understanding is simple. Its purpose is something we discern. And our nearness to the context of this nursery rhyme helps us understand that the purpose is not for some, big big conversation, although I'm sure somebody's written a dissertation on this nursery rhyme, wasted all our time. It's to distinguish a spelling of words. All right. In fact, uses a rhetorical device even. The CCC and the CCC, that right there, that's a rhetorical device. I could have started this song and some of you could have sung it and finished it. Absolutely. So memorable, right? Now you won't get it out of your head. Steve will be walking around in his yard tomorrow and he'll be singing this new snappy tune he learned. Hey, was this even invented by the time you were born? Okay, okay. And in 1673 when it was produced? Okay. Well, I just thought so. Okay, so, and meaning of the rhythm here, right? That's not what I meant. The meaning of the rhyme and your syllabus, the number 2 there, it's nonsense, but it is meant as an instructional tool for small children. Yes, sir, Alan. Yeah. Yeah. They're both right. Yeah, and I didn't mention, well, I didn't mention, right, I didn't say there were contradictions. I said their storytelling and their strategy is different. So the purpose is different. What is Luke's genealogy trying to accomplish? It's not as obvious as what Matthew's genealogy is trying to accomplish. So Matthew's genealogy is validating Mary and the scandal that surrounded that. Luke's genealogy, I'm not as familiar with, and I haven't devised out all of that understanding. It's just an area I haven't done a lot of study with. Now, some have suggested that one is Mary's line and the other is Joseph's line. So there are some theories, but all those theories kind of break down. And anyway, yeah, but here's what gets us closer, and this is exactly the point. Within their context, and I'll talk about my assumptions in a little while, so we all are on the same page that when I just run past something, it's because there's an assumption I'm making. And one of those assumptions is that both Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts are all right. Their facts are accurate. We don't know why their facts are different, but they are telling a story with a different purpose. And so what they select and where they order those stories, remember, I do not believe that biblical authors, whether Old Testament or New Testament, cared quite so much about chronology as we do. Old Testament authors sure don't care. But even New Testament authors, I think you have things that occur and stories that are told and all of that, and they can be reversed and reordered without, for their time, that being considered any kind of credibility issue at all. We find it to be a credibility issue. The question would be, did they find it to be a credibility issue? And people closer to the events evidently didn't find that to be credibility issues. By the way, it's important for us to understand, the early churches were fact-checking very early. I mean, we have lists of potential canonized, that is, biblical New Testament stories that were accepted or rejected very early. So all these modern ones that have come out, like the Gospel of Thomas and some of that stuff, look, those have been rejected since the 4th or 5th century when they were introduced. The churches said, nope, that doesn't have the marks of inspiration. We're not accepting that. And so, lo and behold, Satan tries it out on us again to ensnare new victims of Gnostic heresies and floods it back out there as if these were not rejected very, very early when they first came out. All right, so how do we get it right? One, we understand, and two, we have to gather in the purpose. I want you to turn over to John 21. John 21. And we're going to pick up in verse 15. John 21, 15. All right, any questions before we go any further here? All right, now, I need you to understand, I am super concerned about biblical literacy. We can read our Bibles well, and I'm very concerned with upholding the credibility and the authority of the text. But what I'm not interested in is pat answers that don't answer the questions that are there. The questions are intentional. The things that rub against us, they rub against us because the author, both the divine author, God himself, and the human author, his partner, the mind being God's and the human hand being the tool, all right, those strategies are intentional. And I take every part of those strategies as intentional. So I don't, look, if this is all we got in revealed spoken word of God, it's not a very long book, considering how long it took to write. Right? Mostly, God has been quiet when it comes to inspirational text. So what is in here, I take to be highly specific and useful. And you can't drop things because you don't understand them. And it's not like a modern novel where they just throw in some extra details. All the details matter. Okay, so John 21, 15 through 17. All right, now I'm going to ask you, because I'm going to refute something in just a second, but it's something that you have probably learned. All right. You've learned, many of you, if you've been around church, about agape love. And that there are several different words for agape love, or for love in the New Testament. Right? You've learned, you heard this? Okay. Now here's a conspicuous usage. You can argue with me if you want. That's totally fine to be wrong. So, some would say, and here's where our English is not great at this, at communicating or in being transparent about what is here. What versions of the Bible? I'm in the ESV. What do you guys have? King James, NIV, New King James. New American Standard. We got like a Living Translation or Amplified or anything like that? No. I mean, but you use it. Okay, look at verse 17. Look at verse 17. Everybody look at 17. It says, he said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Okay, does anybody have something other than love right there? Do you love me? Does anyone have something other than? Are you my friend? Okay. All right. Now, anybody else have anything? What is the? Yeah. New American Standard. New American Standard is pointing out that it's a change in the word for love. Okay. Right. Okay. New Jewish Bible. Are you my friend? Okay. Right. Totally reinterprets the meaning. Here's the point. Looking at verse 15. Verse 15. Son of John, do you love me more than these? Okay. Do you agape me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I agape you. He said to him, feed my lambs. And verse 16, he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you agape me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I agape you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you phileo me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you phileo me? And he said to me, Lord, you know everything. You know that I phileo you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. All right, so here's a question. Is the change in wording material? Does it matter? Agape, phileo. And if it does matter, what have you been taught about agape love? What is agape love? Phileo love is friendly, brotherly. Agape has been said to be unconditional. Okay. What else? Have you heard preachers talk about this? There's eros, erotic love. And there's even a lesser used fourth one. I can't remember. But. You know how preachers preach on types of love? Okay, obviously from our English context, I love a soda is not the same as I love my wife. Right? And how long it's been since I had a Dr. Pepper. That's right. Okay, so I mean something different. Right? Young people, they like each other. Right? Or that's not as clear as it used to be in my day. But I say, yeah, hey, I like him. He's cool. I mean something different than I like that girl, don't I? Do I mean something different than I mean like I love that movie? It's so great versus I love a soda. Could be. But I might be amplifying what I'm talking about. So we use love. We throw it around. We obviously throw it around. The question is, does the Bible throw it around? So in this context, this is one where it's really hard to get it right, because I either have to say, think about it this way. If Jesus asks him twice, do you agape me? Do you agape me? So if we say agape is the pinnacle of the types of love, covenantal, sacrificial love, then why does in verse 17 he lower the bar for the final question? Wouldn't he amplify the question? Wouldn't his strategy have been to say, Peter, son of John, do you phileo me? Are you friendly with me? And then ask him that again. And then say, Peter, son of John, do you agape me? That would seem, if it mattered a lot, that would seem to be the strategy. And so we're in this conundrum, right? Same English word that we use, that's our gloss, but we're left with a translation issue, and we got to try to get it right here. So, what do? Well, we need to figure out then some of the purpose for what's going on here. All right? So let's back up a little bit. Verse 4. Pick up verse 4. Find our context and what we're doing. Just as the day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to them, Children, do you have any fish? And they answered him, No. And he said to them, Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, It is the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far off the land, but about 100 yards off. Okay, so what's going on here? What do we got happening? Now, is there a hint that there's something supernaturally prohibiting them from seeing who it is? Okay, is it, if you're 100 yards off, 300 feet, and there's a dude out there and he's hollering to you, could it just be a natural thing? I can't see him. Could have been, right? All right. Yeah, maybe Jesus didn't yell as much as I do, and so they didn't know. I don't know. Okay, so it could be something supernatural, and that would be told to us by John's usage of those type things, right? Okay, so we get to here, and we have a repetition of a story. The cast your nets on the other side of the boat, right? So that's a repetition of a story that's existed already in the telling. This is where the broad picture, having read the whole story, would have helped us. Because then John says it's the Lord, and Peter doesn't wait for the fish, but jumps in, right? Now, I want you to rewind a little bit to the tomb story. Who gets to the tomb first? John does. Who goes in first? Peter. All right. Now, we're expanding our understanding, and we would have to ask ourselves the question, because this is now the second time that John has used ink to tell us something about the way that John responded versus the way Peter responded. That is significant. If we're using an economy principle that God has not wasted time or ink, then what we're saying is this is very important to John. He didn't just tell us once because it happened this way. He told us because it was important that it happened this way. So he spent time. In this case, it's a little different scenario, but instead of waiting to haul in the fish, Peter is already swimming to the shore. So he put on his outer garment. He was stripped for work. He didn't want to show up in just his underwear in front of the Lord, I guess, and he throws himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, and they dragged the net full of fish. And they were not far from land, about 100 yards off. And when they got out on land, verse 9, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid out on it and bread. Interesting. Okay, catch the irony here. Jesus gave them the fish, but he didn't need them to bring some fish in. He's already got that covered. I guess he snapped and they jumped on the skewers and got on the fire. Well, he's already got it taken care of. So he's not, there's a little bit of humor, I think, involved in this telling of the story. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place and the fish laid out on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have just caught. So Simon is almost to point out. And so Simon Peter went aboard and hauled a net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn.
Why did they tell us exactly how many there are?
Right?
So you're the one that's telling us, like you told us the last time, when it slows down.
Yeah. A lot of detail here, right?
Why are they telling
Yes.
us exactly
Yes.
how many
Yes.
there?
And that's exactly the kind of things that help us get it right. Because, now, 153. Here's the question. Is there something significant about the number 153? And I say, probably not. But the fact that he tells us the number means that there's something about this whole narrative that has just crawled to a snail's pace. Detail, detail, detail. Why all these details, right?
Yes, because
Yeah.
that's what you taught us last time.
Right.
It slows down like that. Pay attention.
That's right. And so, and we are, right? We're listening for each new thing that happens. What is Jesus going to say next? Bring some of the fish that you have caught. What does that mean? Now, here's two sides that we could take this. We could either super spiritualize this, okay, which I think is an incorrect direction unless you have validation for doing that. We could and probably should understand some spiritual lesson between the way in which John responds and the way in which Peter responds to the Lord. It may not be a matter of rightness or wrongness. What it may be is a matter of leading to the kind of authority questions that are going to transpire in the early church. Okay, and we would discern those from the reading of the whole text. So verse 12, Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. And Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. And when they had finished breakfast, okay, now we're leading in, right? When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Okay. Any clues as to why Jesus turns to Simon Peter and asks him this question? Any clues near this question that would hint to us why Simon Peter may have gotten a question?
Is it because he's the one that jumped out of the boat?
What do you think? I've heard that one.
Yeah, his service was in question.
Oh.
Either that, which is more distant from this text, or what John is building the case for, it may have been partly the denial theme in the broader context, but in this very near context, I think the closer clue is that Peter has consistently gone first.
He was
First in the tomb. He couldn't run as fast as John, but he sure as heck wasn't going to get left outside. And he doesn't wait for the fish, but he's already on shore. Notice he disappears from the narrative. Like, was he sitting at the charcoal fire when the rest of the guys walked up? Doesn't tell us anything, right? Why? Because it's waiting to reintroduce us to Simon Peter, because the only thing that was important was that Simon Peter didn't wait to bring the fish in. He jumped out, and then when the Lord pointed out the haul, it's Simon Peter who single-handedly, I guess, goes back and hauls in the 153 large fish because the Lord said, bring some of what you got. And then Simon Peter gets the question, do you love me more than these? In other words, you did more than them in this narrative, right? Simon Peter did more than them. Do you love me more than these? Simon says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Notice he doesn't repeat the superlative, the more than. Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said, so Jesus says to him, feed my lambs. And he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. Notice that he does not ask him, do you love me more than these? Right? He just asked him, do you love me? Now, either this is for literary variation, meaning, in order not to get monotonous, or he's intentionally working from, I've seen your dramatic actions of love. You jumped out of the boat, swam here 100 yards. I would have drowned at about yard 50, but anyway. Okay? You got here first, and he's working his way down. Do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And so Jesus changes the word. Do you phileo me? Right? Do you love me? He said to him a third time. In fact, what seems as much focus in this passage is that you have the repetition a second time, a third time. John is very interested in us keeping track of the fact that Jesus is pushing this theme, this purpose. I think the interest here is not so much in the change of the word from one kind of love to another kind of love, but a question of the capacity, the fullness, the sold outness of what is being asked. I actually don't think this is in restoration to the 3 times denial even. I think this is simply saying from major, do you love me more than this? Are you proud like that? To do you love me in even the smallest of things? So there is some change in the questioning, but not a big change in the meaning. All right, so phileo or agape is not the question. The context is the question. Now, I think we got to be really careful, because what we can end up with is what's called a root fallacy, in which we say a particular word always means a certain thing based on its root. Phileo and agape can mean the same intensity of love. But they don't have to mean something different. They can be used for variation, and they're used by different authors in different ways. And at times, they can be used for vile things. Like Judas is said to have agape'd money. He loved money, agape'd money. So, and that there's nothing spiritual about that other than being wicked. It's nothing to do with God, though, right?